Hey friends, it's Kristy. This week, I'm continuing the conversation from this video that I posted recently. If you haven't watched it yet, I would suggest to go ahead and give it a looky-loo. Here's the thing. I started a conversation that was a little bit of a creative controversy, where I double dip in my palette and kind of make a mess on my palette. Well, I want to continue that conversation today. Here is what we're going to talk about. Please, for the love, stop cleaning your watercolor palettes. So I'm going to help you learn how to shift from a ritual of cleaning and tidiness, which I kind of see as a ritual of waste, to a ritual of experimentation that ultimately gives you the same result, which is a clean palette. On this channel, friends, when you subscribe, you won't miss a beat of learning how to make art for joy's sake. So, do you want to paint with me? Come on, let's go. All right, friends, it's important for you to know that I obviously still realize you're going to need to clean your palette at some point. We're never not going to clean our palettes, but I just want to show you side by side what my dirty palette looked like in the beginning before I painted with them and what it looks like after and how much paint I was actually able to use before I did the final wipe down. It's incredible. Okay, the point of today's lesson is pretty simple. We're going to paint only with our dirty mixing palettes so that we don't waste that color. So instead of wiping it away with a paper towel and all that pigment going to waste, we're going to use it for some experimentation and practice. Creating two different paintings today. One is just a simple pattern with my 3/4 inch wash brush. And then the other is a mix of just berries, leaves, and a little bit of flowering detail. And we are going to have a blast. Okay, I'm using the Art for Joy's Sake brush collection, but only a few brushes. I'm going to do a little bit with the liner, a little bit with the round brush, of course, the flat brush, and then the 1/4 inch dagger. Friends, I'm painting first on arches and next on Academy, but truly use what you have and use what you love. First things first, you need to spray things down. Remember, we're only painting from the pigment that's left over in our mixing palettes. So spray to get everything nice and juicy and ready to be used. I have two palettes here. They are some of my most well-loved, well-used. The palette in the top left is just a collection of pigments, some that I've mixed from scratch, some are Winsor & Newton, and then the palette on the right is my Mission Gold palette that was in the aforementioned video that caused a little bit of creative controversy. This is just a great example of an exercise and experimentation that you can do with these messy palettes. You take your 3/4 inch wash brush, or any brush really, and just start picking up color, making a stroke, rinsing or not, and making some more strokes. Now, I would love to see you kind of bump up some of those strokes next to one another so they start to mingle and bleed into one another, because that's where you're going to get that super cool explosive watercolor effect, right? Be sure to kind of change your direction. I'm keeping it kind of horizontal, vertical, but you could go diagonal. You could make short little strokes, but the point is, did you see that green there? See what that green exploded into that yellow? Naturally, friends, these paintings, these experimental ritual of experimentation, remember, these paintings are about doing away with this ritual of waste, as I'm going to call it from now on. And we're going to introduce a ritual of experimentation when we feel the need to clean our palettes. These paintings are by nature going to be a little muddy. Of course, because you're mixing palettes, they get a little muddy. That's why you feel like you want to clean them. Oh, but friends, those muddy colors have so much to teach you. What happens when a little bit of orange gets mingled in with your blues? What happens when a purple gets mingled in with your beautiful cadmium red? What happens when you let them explode together on the page? This is the time to get messy. You're going to wipe down these palettes anyway. So why not double dip? Why not pick up one color and then go right to another color and double load that brush? This is the time to get crazy, because remember, you're going to wipe it away when it's all said and done. You're going to clean it up, tidy it up, reset. Look at those rusty colors bleeding into the greens. Even though this is more of a muted palette that's happening here, it's still incredibly exciting. Did you see what just happened? That orangey tone went into that dusty midnight blue and created almost a purple. And you know what colors did that. So you're going to be able to kind of log that in your memory. So much to be absorbed here with this exercise. There's a little midnight blue again. I do not even remember what colors I mixed on these palettes, friends, so I am not going to be able to tell you. And I actually find that to be very freeing. But if you're the type of painter that knows exactly what colors are on the palette and what you're mixing together, go ahead and take some notes and be like, whoa, something really cool happened when I took the Hooker green off the palette and it mixed with a little bit of Naples from Winsor & Newton. You can make notes about this. And if that's how you remember and that's how you learn, go for it. This is the time. Just keep going along. As some of your brushstrokes start to dry, you can go right over top of them, almost like a glaze. I've mentioned glazing before, and it basically is when one brushstroke is put down, you let it dry, and then you go over top with another brushstroke to see what kind of wonderfulness happens when those two intersect. It's almost like a creative basket weave effect that we are building here. I'm being very organic and kind of asymmetrical about my approach. Maybe you want to be a little more symmetrical and really make it look like a basket weave. But again, remember, the point here is not to create a finished painting, is not to create something necessarily that you could go and sell. It's not to create something that maybe anyone will ever see. The point here is to, one, not waste your paints, not waste your pigments, and two, to use this time and this opportunity to experiment with an already messy palette. Just keep going, fill that page. It takes about 5 to 7 minutes, depending on the size of your brush. And then you've used all of that pigment. You could take a moment here, rewind, to see how much pigment was on these palettes when we started, to see just how much pigment you were actually able to utilize. And imagine all of that pigment would have been wiped away if you hadn't done this experimental exercise. So my point in creating this session, friends, is not to throw shade at all. My point in creating this session is just to encourage you to kind of flip the switch on this idea of cleaning your palettes. Because I found myself in the comments of that video I mentioned a few times now. I found myself like, no, don't clean your palette. But I was like, check yourself, Kristy Rice. Some folks want to clean their palettes, and that is fine. But let's just flip the switch on what we do just before we clean the palette. Take a moment to soak in the crazy beautiful that's happening here. Albeit the colors are muddier. I'm not going to call these muddy colors. I'm going to call these muted colors, tonal colors. They're gorgeous. Take a moment to soak it in. Take a moment to speak kindly to yourself. And just breathe in this moment, knowing that you took some time just to paint, just to make art for joy's sake, and you took the resources that you had, the paint that was on the palette, and used it in an amazing way. Now, of course, we still have a ton of color on these mixing palettes, so let's use it up, friends. I've got the 1/4-inch dagger and I'm starting to create some leaves here, just some very, very basic leaves. If you want to dive a little bit more into painting leaves and how I go about it, check out this video. It is absolutely hands down the most viewed video on my channel. So if you haven't seen it yet, I would definitely encourage you to take a look. And also, friends, this is a great time. If you're enjoying this conversation, if you think this conversation is interesting or at the very least inspiring, go ahead and give this video a boop, which is a thumbs up. And that lets YouTube know that you're having a good time and that maybe some other folks should take a look at this video. I would be so appreciative. All right, we're continuing on here. Just creating leaves, friends. You can create any type of leaf you want. I'm even starting to put in some blueberries. I've got a lot of blues on these mixing palettes. I mentioned it a little earlier, friends. This is the time to get messy. If you wanted to experiment with double, triple loading your brush without rinsing in between, if you wanted to experiment with mixing on the page, like in the video here, this is your time because the palette is already dirty. You've got nothing to lose. You've got nothing to mess up. You're not even dipping into your pans of color. You're only dipping into your mixing palette that you are already going to wipe clean anyway. I like to encourage myself with exercises to fill the page. You do you. If you don't feel like filling the page, stop. If you feel like it's time for you to wipe that palette clean, wipe her clean. I tend to paint smaller when I'm doing exercises like this, so I do typically have the motivation to fill the whole page. This is about a 5x7. Actually, it's a little bigger. I think it's like a 5x8 size. This is a great time to also experiment with your brush strokes. If you have a new brush that you're looking to kind of get accustomed to and quote, break in, this is a great time to do that. Let's get a closer look here, friends, and see where we're at. It's also a great way to experiment with composition. Take this opportunity. Feel good about yourself that you're not wasting all that beautiful pigment. Because we all know, right, how far watercolor goes. A little bit of good pigment goes a very long way. So it always just seemed like such a shame to me to waste it. Think about composition. Think about some of your leaves being bigger and bolder and taking up more space, like those kind of in the left middle. Think about some viney elements contrasting with the bigger, broader leaves, like those vines all the way to the left here that I'm working on. Think about adding some pointy leaves, some round leaves, some long, elongated leaves. This is your time to dig in, be crazy, experiment. Now, I will say this, it's important as you get towards the end of the life of the color on your mixing palettes, things are going to get even more muddy. But this isn't the time to retreat. This is the time to really dig in because you are going to start to see some incredible grays and browns show up in your painting. This is the time to make mental notes, actual notes on a piece of paper. Maybe you have a notebook where you keep track of color mixtures, color blends. Make note because you're going to create some incredibly inspiring neutrals towards the end of these exercises. Because you've been pulling all that, presumably, you've been pulling all the really pigmented color from your palette first, right? But now you're kind of left with all of the leftover. But that is where the beautiful, rich neutrals, the tans, the browns, the taupes, the grays, that's where they start to happen. And they are incredible. All right, friends, I don't know about you, but I'm pretty inspired. I want to just go pull open all of my palettes and start using up my mixing trays and see what comes of them. I would love to hear your thoughts and comments. I would love to continue the conversation. And just know that, friends, I am here for you. I love painting with you, and I love creating art for joy's sake on this channel. Thank you for being here. Until next time, happy painting.